What is up, all the geek and geekettes out there? It's us, back again. Well, half the geeks, and then our amazing friend from Road to Carvalon, Ambler,
Hi.
here to finally discuss the final two episodes of The Acolyte.
We did
As
it.
we did it. We made it to the end, which I'm kind of annoyed at the very end, but we'll get to
Okay.
that. But yes, finally episode 7 and 8. So 7 was last week, 8 was this week. Josh has obviously been on a trip, and we've both been kind of doing a lot of things. So we said, let's do both episodes this week. Why not? Right?
Wrapping it all
Why
up.
not? Right?
And it kind of works out because the last two episodes were so intertwined.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think the last two episodes were some of the highlight, was probably the highlight of the season.
Mm-hmm.
There were many things that I have questions on though. Because I feel like not knowing a lot of the background stuff, when I got to the end, I was like, well, what does all of it
There was
mean?
quite a few deep fan based Star Wars references in these last two episodes where I
Exactly.
was like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what that means.
Yeah, well, it's like there's moments where the camera will linger on something, and it's like, okay, that's supposed to be important.
Right.
And the creepy guy kind of watching from afar, and you can see the hand.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with episode 7. What were your first impressions through that episode?
I was really thankful to get the question answered, like what actually went down with, the fire and the death of everyone and the witches. And then we get this we get more of this background into how the twins were created
Mm-hmm.
in a way, and it's kind of left it. Okay, this is we've been saying this the whole time that we've been recording, and I was really focused in on this whole virgence. When we were texting, I was like, virgins,
Mm-hmm.
tell me more.
What
I
is
was
it?
all, yeah, I was so excited because in this whole season, as we've been sitting down, I've been saying oh, okay, well, their being, the way that they were created, all of this is very fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they brought that up, I was on the edge of my chair, so ready. But then they don't explain anything. They leave it very vague. And I was like,
Oh man,
why would you do this to
it's
me?
so heavy. And I said the same thing. I'm like, if you don't know Star Wars, you have no idea what they just talked about. And even I, having all this Star Wars based knowledge, was like, hold on, let me go look up virginces again because they're very very rarely referenced in anything. The only references we really have to virginces are possibly that Anakin Skywalker was created by a virgin because they've always said he was born of the Force. We never know who his father is, that kind of stuff.
Okay,
Um,
but he was just okay, so he was just brought into being from the Force. But in the case of
right,
the twins, same thing, but then they split the one person into two. So
something
same
along
kind.
that line. I'm
Okay,
guessing. I
okay.
don't know. Like I said, virginces are so rare. The only other reference to a virgins I know of is the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The actual High Council Temple is built on top of a virgin site,
Okay.
which is why they always congregate on Coruscant. And during the Sith Wars, when they were both fighting for dominance, there was actually a Sith temple built there too, which is underneath the
Okay, so it's
Jedi temple.
kind of like building your house on a battery.
Basically, yes. Or
Okay.
like a sacred site in any kind of religion, you want to be as close as possible to that site.
Okay.
So like Mecca for
Yeah.
certain religions and things like that. So that's what I understand. Virginces they're very rare throughout the galaxy. They're not recorded. There's not a lot of information on what a virgin actually is. They just say it's a strong presence of the force. But
Okay.
what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody knows. And
Exactly.
obviously its power can be harnessed in some way, to create life.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think that's again, like I said it in what was it, episode was it 3? Whatever episode it was with the flashback of the witches.
Mm-hmm.
I felt personally like when we got to that episode, I was like, this might be my favorite one.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went back to the same location, the same, background, I was like, oh yeah, like give me more. I'm ready for it.
Right.
But it really failed to answer a lot of the questions that I think make this theme so interesting, because it's like, okay, so we know roughly how they were created, but we don't know why. We don't know like what the witches, what their mother,
What the
what
thought
the
process?
intent
Yeah.
was behind it, and then what the intent was as like splitting the two.
Yeah. That was my
So
big thing. We had the first flashback where we were lost on so much, and I was like, "Oh, finally, we're getting the second flashback. We're gonna figure it out." We found out everything about the Jedi side, but we're still so lost on the Coven side of why did they even run in the first place? Like, what was the
yeah,
reason the Coven needed to exist?
yeah,
Hopefully, we get those answers later. I don't know. Based on how it ended, I don't think season 2 is headed that way. So I'm like, are they just? Oh, they just happen to be created by a Coven. We're just kind of throwing that in there.
yeah, and it I mean, on one hand, like it's a really interesting hook because like it does
Hmm.
leave that question to be explored later if they would want to do that.
They could even
But
do a
like,
shoot off series on it.
yeah, but as a viewer, it's like, oh man, like you just ripped the most interesting facet of the
Right.
show away from me. So I was like, oh, that's awful. And then, like I'm not trying to jump around too much, but when we get to like the final moments of Saul, it almost like I thought for a second, I was like, okay, he's gonna like explain more, or he's gonna say
Mhm.
something more, and then he like chokes. I'm like, no.
Why? He literally choked.
Yeah.
No.
But
Oh, man.
I liked the witches, I liked the Virgin stuff. I thought that was all like a really
Mhm.
nice like inclusion to the story. And I
Right.
think overall, like it does kind of answer the question, and it kind of doesn't, but leaves them an out for more material later on.
Mhm.
So, like, putting that aside, we also had, the beginning of this show is kind of this murder mystery, and that's like very
Right.
quickly, you know, wrapped up in a bow, and we put that aside as well. And I think for me, the next like most interesting aspect of the show had nothing to do with the twins, but
Mhm.
actually like what was going on in the political scheming of Vernestra
Yeah.
and everyone on the council, and what's going on behind the scenes, because we had said so many times like there's something up with Saul, something we can't trust about him. We were right on that.
Right.
And we also said there was something very suspect about Vernestra, which turned out to be
Fully
pretty,
correct too.
yeah.
Which I was so excited at the end of episode 7, I was thinking through it and I was researching stuff and I went, "Oh crap. I had that theory that Benestra and Darth Smiley had a connection somewhere."
Yes.
And then they showed it that we did. And I was like,
Yes.
"Oh, I was right."
Yeah, it's
Uh,
like this show is like the many layers of like Acolyte,
oh, 100%.
the Acolyte onion.
Yes. Peeling it back one tier at a time.
Yeah.
Oh, but no, my biggest probably downfall of 7 was the whole leaving the hole for the witches, like what happened. But also, we had the murder mystery at the beginning. We were like, "Oh, okay, May went crazy and killed everybody." That's not the case at all. She accidentally started the fire, didn't
Mhm.
realize how much she was doing that, and then the Jedi wiped everybody else out.
Yep.
We found that out real quick. The other thing that I marked though, did we just miss the mark on May's head all the way up until now, or did they not show it, or just like thought, "Oh, we'll add that in on episode 7" because they
I don't
forgot to keep adding it for makeup or something?
I don't know. I
I
don't
don't remember that
know.
mark being on her head until episode 7.
I mean, I noticed it for a split second, but then I think also I was trying so hard to keep up and like
Mhm.
remember all the undercurrents, who's in cahoots with who might be an acolyte of who. And
Mhm.
so like I kind of was
I
just like, all right, whatever.
I almost felt like it was like the fans said through like episode 6, like we keep forgetting who's who, who's May, who's Osha. So they went, "Oh, we'll put a mark on May's head so everybody remembers who she is."
Yeah.
I was like, "That I don't remember seeing that." And then the Jedi automatically, it's a dark mark. How the freak do you know that? You don't even know these people. You don't know what
we,
their
we
marks
just
mean.
know.
You just know it's a dark mark right away. So
Yeah.
there's a couple downfalls, but I still will stand by what I put out on TikTok. Episode 7 was by far like the best episode. Just
Okay.
story wise, everything they put out, I loved it. And then my favorite reference is one that 99.9% of people probably missed because
I
they haven't
probably missed
read the
it.
High
So tell
Republic
me.
book. So, the very beginning, when they're at the campfire and they're saying this planet is uninhabited because of a hyperspace disaster.
Okay.
The first High Republic book that just got released in the last few years is solely based on that hyperspace disaster. That's the beginning and all the aftermath. So what happened was, spoiling the book a little bit here, but not too much, was there was a giant transport ship going through hyperspace that imploded in hyperspace, and then all the shards were leaving the lanes, still traveling at speed and hitting planets and destroying them, like literally taking out entire planets.
Oh.
And it wiped out a huge area. It killed millions of people. It was a huge thing for the Jedi to try to overcome and stop, and it just turned crazy. Um, so that was the disaster, and it led into who caused it, why did it happen, and to start following through the rest of the books. And Venestra was part of that. It's where she proved herself to become a Jedi so young.
Okay.
So that's where that kind of all comes like into play.
Okay.
So that was my favorite reference of the entire episode. I loved it. I was like, "Yeah, I know what they're talking about."
See, that's like I think too, like that's another thing where on one hand, I'm ambivalent because I'm like, "Oh, I wish I would have been able to catch like all of the Easter eggs." But
Mhm.
then on the other side, if I knew the material well enough, would I have been that person sitting through the whole series, especially towards the middle where it was like, they can't do that. How did they do
Oh,
that? You
picking
know?
little yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
and
like
there's still picks that people have been making that I'm like, "Guys, stop." I know all about it. I get where you're kind of trying to come from, but it's Star Wars. They're gonna change everything.
Yeah, I don't really have any like major critiques. I think the only one
Mhm.
thing that felt a little like weird to me was when Basil like pulled the power and like shut down the ship as he was like chasing
Oh,
May.
because he was about to shoot May down.
Yeah, and I'm like, what are we doing here, Basil?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out why Basil's getting involved at all.
He's so honorable.
I'm gonna attack May first, but then when she's running away, about to get shot down, I'm gonna stop that.
Yeah,
I don't know. That was weird.
maybe he just, he's a good
Basil's more
capybara.
force sensitive than they realize.
Yeah.
Something of that nature. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
How did you feel about like the portrayal of the Jedi as a whole?
Throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, like I mean,
I
especially after like things have ended and like we know that they're not like
It makes so much sense as someone who's been through the High Republic series. And like I said, High Republic Jedi are my favorite era. I don't know why. I just love it. They're
mhm.
flashy. They show their power. They're everywhere. They were
Yeah.
literally everywhere. Like you couldn't go to a planet without finding a Jedi that was stationed there. You know, you had
Well, they're
Kelnaka
very
that was stationed out in the middle of nowhere.
yeah, they're very
Everyone knew she
rock
was there.
star. Like
Hmm.
they're very
Exactly.
glamorous kind of.
Much more of a peacekeeping force than a negotiation force as they become. And it's always wondered, like, how do you go from this height of power to where we saw them starting with episode 1, Phantom Menace, and moving on. Of these, they're more conservative. They're like monk-like more now. They're not as flashy, and they're more willing to just take you out and move on than work through things.
Yeah.
And we stopped seeing all the extra lightsaber colors and things like that because there wasn't as much diversity. And I think it just shows that it literally was the downfall of politics, Jedi not keeping to the code, the order kind of falling apart. So maybe that's where we're headed with it.
Yeah, like I think it was really interesting too to kind of the witches were almost like a foil to the Jedi, where they're both
Hmm,
looking at each other and saying like, no, like you're doing things wrong, like our
right.
way is better, when essentially like one is being portrayed as a cult and the other one is kind of like, I don't know, like monks or something, but
Yeah.
more
Like a
like,
major religious power.
yeah, yeah. And so I thought that was a really interesting like context to like these two groups, to show that like people who use the force, and I'm putting like, I'm putting like all of the like darker people aside, like the more
Hmm.
evil people aside. So like you're seeing that like people that can use the force, it's not a monolith. There's other people that can do other things
Oh
with it,
yeah.
that have kind of based their own ideals and lives around it.
And it's
But
a theme that is seen throughout Star Wars. You have this coven. There's another witch coven that is more dark centered throughout the Clone Wars and the
yeah,
Resistance. They're known to know how to use the Force. They just use it a different way. Um,
it's kind of
there's
like
a
that Spider-Man meme where they're like pointing at each other like
exactly.
you.
We all know how to use the Force. You're just doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Aren't we though? I mean, it's a huge conflict between the Jedi and the Mandalorians when you research into that, because it's said that Mandalorians have some form of force sensitivity. That's why they're able to fight Jedi so easily. But there's only one recorded Jedi from Mandalore ever. Me and Josh have a theory that Obi-Wan Kenobi is also from Mandalore, but that's never been confirmed. But that's a whole nother shoot off. But it is a thing where there are these other force sensitive cults and covens or whatever you want to call them out there that the Jedi don't even know about at some points, but they just think, oh well, we found you, now you have to fold into us.
Yeah, like I mean
And it's
it's
part of their downfall.
very, it's I really appreciated being able to look at the Jedis and be like, "You know what? I don't like this.
Mhm.
I don't think."
They're not perfect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I love like them bringing in like a aspect of moral grayness to like, the beacon of light, the hope for the galaxy. Like it's nice to see them represented in a way that's not so stereotypically like hero, I
Right.
guess. And I think that's like a fun thing that they played with that I enjoyed. And also, I mean, it was unexpected for me, like maybe for you guys, not so much because you know what's going on more. But I thought it was a fun little like side plot, I guess, to kind of go into their world and see, why some people might not be like team Jedi
Hmm.
100%. And I mean, that's pretty cool. And I think too, like going back to the witches, it's interesting because like in the context of everything, like the Sith, the Jedi, the Coven, they all look like cults in my eyes, because it's like everybody's just doing all kinds of weird stuff on their own.
Oh yeah.
And it, like, to me it raises the question of like, oh man, like is it like a situation where it's like, you know what, like power corrupts. That's just how it goes. And I think it's an interesting, way to look at just like force users in general,
Hmm.
because it had been, in my eyes, so incredibly black and white up until this.
Right. There's all that political power and everything. Um, I mean, we even saw it a little bit with how they were able to influence. Forgetting Jedi names. Torben and
Mm.
Kalnaka during
Mhm.
the whole thing. Like Torben makes a little more sense as a Padawan at that time.
Yeah, he's kind of
Obviously,
like
he
reactive.
yes, he's very reactive, which is a more common trait of Padawans. Obviously, it's honestly a big thing of Anakin's too. He was so reactive to just get in there and get it done. Um, and also with Kalnaka, like literally, it took the whole coven to do it, but they took over Kalnaka and were using her, and
Yeah.
that shows us kind of more why she was like, "Nope, deuces, I'm out. See you later. Don't want to do this anymore," and isolated
Yeah.
herself away from everybody. Right?
It makes sense though. Like after like it's I guess talking about this now, like I didn't even think about the aspect of kind of like trauma because for the twins, like trauma was a big part of their story, but then like
Hmm.
looking at everyone else around them, they're all struggling.
Right.
Everybody's struggling.
In some form or other. Yeah. I mean, you had Indara who basically was forced to take out a whole coven when she didn't want to.
Right.
But the fact she did
Right.
it through the force without touching anyone is insane. That's an insane amount of power she
Yeah.
just displayed there. It was crazy. But he explains
Yeah.
as well, like she probably would have been a high counselor, master of the Republic, but she went, "Nope, see you later. I'm gonna go hide because I can't
Yeah.
live with the fact I just did this."
I think the other question, I guess, for me that I was still kind of like iffy on was, am I saying this right? Chimere? Chimere? Chimere?
Hmm.
Smiley?
Hmm.
Um,
I don't know.
I still don't understand like what the deal is about like needing to train someone. Like I guess I don't understand like what is the incentive? Does that mean like you finally made it?
So
Or like
there is a thought process behind when you go from Padawan to Jedi Knight. That's either you've passed the trials or you've done some great feat, something of that nature. But to go from Jedi Knight to Master, it is said one of the things you've had to do is train a successful Padawan, a successful knight. So there is I think, a thought process with that.
okay.
But then also with the Sith and how their concept, especially in this time period, it's the concept of two. Doesn't mean there's only two Sith ever in the entire galaxy, but they're only going to team up one on one. So you have a
Okay.
master and an apprentice. Uh,
I mean, that's kind of like a layer of protection too, because if you're working with
yeah,
a whole group, if someone
that's
gets
why
caught, they can
one of the
tell
downfall of the
everyone.
Sith armies was they were so large and everybody wanted to be at the top that they just kept taking each other out as well. So it wasn't just them versus Jedi; it was them versus themselves, as far as
Doesn't
I understand it.
Did I remember this incorrectly? But I feel like we had talked about how, like, at some point, if you're the acolyte of like a Sith, at one point, like the student kills the master.
That's generally the pattern. Is
Okay.
the
So it's
the
just kind of
student is
like
always trying to outdo the master.
okay. So it just
It's
kind of happens a lot. It's not like a rule.
yeah, it's another downfall of
Okay.
the Sith because they're so seeking power that the
Mhm.
only way to become more powerful is to overcome the power that's controlling you, right?
Okay.
So it's a common theme to always see that they're trying to overcome that next thing and become the master.
Okay.
And you see it a lot throughout the Clone Wars whenever you're watching all these different Sith. Because at one point there's like four active Sith Lords technically during the Clone Wars, and they're all basically fighting each other while fighting the war at the same time because they all want to be the top, and it's pretty funny.
Messy.
It's messy,
Messy.
definitely messy.
No,
Um,
I think that's interesting though, because it leaves a lot of questions about the relationship between Osha and Kamir. So, like, you get the sense that she's incredibly powerful, and he is too. But I mean, like, she just was killing people with her brain, with the force. Like, she didn't even need to fight. So like when she has that face-to-face moment with Saul after Saul
Mhm.
reveals, like, I actually killed everyone, I was like, okay, like, so now they're showing us how powerful she is and her capabilities and why, like, what the big fuss around these two women were, like, what is the potential in them. I liked that a lot.
Mhm.
When we go back to the twins, the one thing that, like, didn't sit right with me, and I guess maybe I was hoping for, which I mean, this would have been really tragic, honestly, but I was expecting that when he wipes May's memory.
Yeah.
So we had been talking about how, like, they're not actually two people, they're one person split in half.
Mhm.
I legitimately thought that he was going to be able to, like, put them back together, and when he was gonna, like, do the, like,
I
mind
seriously
wipe
was
thing.
watching that mind wipe and waiting for either OSHA to stab May right there and just kill her,
Mhm.
or literally, like, him to, like, screw it up and accidentally wipe both their minds or something of that nature. I am to this point, why? Why did we wipe her memory? What was the point?
I don't I don't
I don't
understand,
get
like,
it at all.
I know I know it's, like, very selfless and, like, they're trying to show, like, she's a good person to sacrifice so much for her sister, but at the same time, it upset me so much because I was just like, "Man, like, that might be worse than death. That might be a fate worse than death to know that, like, you had a life, but you're not able to remember it. Like,
Mhm.
that might be worse than just being gone." So,
Right?
like, I was almost hoping for, like, it could have been, like, it could have been 2 options, like, in my in my mind, like, in my as I was thinking, like, spur of the moment as it was happening, if they got, like, smushed back together into one being,
Mm.
would that mean that, like, all of the memories of both people are there, but, like, there's still only one consciousness, so essentially one of them dies. Like, there's only one body, so, like,
In a sense.
partially one of them dies in a way. So, like, that would be very tragic and almost kind of go like a horror story route aspect where it was like you essentially just kind of like, I don't know, got rid of one of them. But, like, there's the other aspect too of, like, if they are one being split into 2, I don't I need to know how the mechanism of that works. Like, I need to
Yeah.
know, like, the logistics of this because I'm
And it's the
such
whole
a
thing I've been trying to, because they even went into the whole, their metachlorians are the exact same, which has never been recorded ever. Everyone
okay.
has.
Can you explain what that means a little bit?
So, do you understand metachlorians at
Mm-mm.
all? Okay. So, metachlorians are what throughout Star Wars universe are known as the life force of the universe. And they're
Okay.
how you're able to tap into the force. So, Jedi's automatically have a higher metachlorian count than most the average normal person. But there
Okay.
are certain Jedi like Anakin, Yoda. Anakin's known as having the highest count ever recorded.
Okay.
So he can be super in tune with the force, right? And so the higher your metachlorian count, the more in tune with the force you are going to be. But nobody is the exact same. It's just like actual twins in real life. Our fingerprints aren't the same.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're completely different people. You look completely different. Basically, the only thing that could be the same is maybe DNA, right?
Right.
Metachlorians being the exact same level in two different people is just unheard. Like,
Okay.
how can it be that perfect? You know?
Mhm.
So it just explains how they were both born completely of the Force, not conceived in any natural method, and they are exactly the same person.
Yeah. I want answers on that. Like
I want more answers on it too. They do
yeah,
just
the
go,
logic.
oh,
Yeah, the logic side of my brain is like frothing at the bit where it was like, I need answers.
Right? Why are
But I
you
mean,
hiding this from me?
yeah, like that was the most interesting aspect of it all because like and then now we're like getting into like science meets, and I know it's not magic in
Right.
this world, but it's kind of like science meets magic where it's like
Oh,
you're
yeah.
you're getting into these like really deep kind of like metaphysical undercurrents of like what makes someone a person and their
Uh-huh.
connection to the force. And to me, I'm like, oh, that's so like that's really deep and intriguing. So I don't know, like, yeah, it
The
kind
thing that
of bummed
confused me
me out.
about that reference specifically, though, was there was an obvious difference, though, in Osha and May's abilities from the
It seemed
very
that
beginning,
way. It seemed that way.
right? And especially when we got to see, because we didn't realize until episode 7 that May went through the test as well.
Hmm.
I thought it was just Osha, but May went through it as well, and May knew exactly what she was looking at and went throwing this test out there. She just answered C to every answer basically.
Hmm.
Um, whereas May or OSHA, as we understand it, was basically coached
Hmm.
by Soul to pass the test
Yeah.
because Indara felt that and went, "Really, really,
Hmm.
you're gonna skew the answers to get what you want."
I
So
think that was an interesting, I don't know, I really liked that flashback though, like going back, seeing things
yeah,
from like the other perspective, from like the Jedi perspective, I guess, what was really happening and going on.
right,
I guess my other big question about Kamir is I don't I don't really understand his motivations other than, if it's just power, that's totally fine. That's
right.
like an easy, like it is what it is. But I guess I was kind of hoping that there would be something more and it
More
wouldn't be so,
explanation, and that was the
yeah, not
thing.
so black and white maybe. Like he
Like I
just,
said, yeah, it we've left with such a hole because also there's obviously a connection between him and Vanestra. Vanestra steps off the ship and immediately both of them go, "Uh-oh.
you're here. Yeah.
Uh-oh, I can feel you." But then he puts on the helmet and she can't feel him anymore. I went, "Okay, so now the helmet is basically Magneto's helmet. Cool." Didn't feel that one coming on. Um so looking through that, I was just kind of like, "Wait." So my thought, my theory is she is one of her failed apprentices. That's
Right.
my thought. Because obviously she's this huge name in the Jedi. She became a knight at 15. She was a master not long after that. She's a prodigy.
Yeah, that
So if
seems the
she
most
has a
logical
failure,
explanation.
she
Yeah.
would want to hide that to say, I didn't fail. I've never failed. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So she's hiding it. But what's the failure? And why do they? Because he stated in, what was it, 6? Are you a Jedi? I was.
Mhm.
So he was part of the order at some point, but obviously then there was a failure. And there's obviously the whole thing of how Benestra was the one who said, "Get out of here, Ocean. No, I
Yeah.
don't want you around." She's obviously it's part of her duties to do that. So
Yeah, and
big
I think too that relationship would have been again like really interesting to explore.
hmm
And I think, like as a whole, I did appreciate the twins and how their story, like folded into the Jedi story.
right,
But like on the other hand, everything that's going on with the Jedi's, Vernestra, Soul, their whole group, and then like the politics of it all,
right,
it was such a tease to get that all at the end because you're waiting for all of the answers. And although they did give us the most basic answers to the questions that we had, which
yeah,
checked some boxes for me, I was like, okay, now we've like left a whole like load of other stuff with a question mark hanging over it. And now I have way more questions,
Right.
which on one hand can be disappointing, but on the other hand, it's a very smart way of storytelling to keep people engaged, to keep people talking about things, and to leave the option to explore that at a later date if they
Right.
choose to.
That's the thing, though. Like, this is why I hate 8 episode seasons because you can't get enough
Yeah.
information in there, and it's clear that they were trying to say, okay, this is the origin story, but we're gonna kill every main character off right there, and now we're gonna push into the Vanestra story or something of that nature, right?
They could have, I mean, this would have been a huge commitment. They could have done season 1 focusing on the Virgins, the creation of the twins, the coven, and then left it kind of at the question mark of like, how did everyone die? Season
Oh yeah,
2, we go into the murder mystery. We don't know what happened. Like, it's still left up in the air, but we know about the virgins. We know how they were created.
yeah.
And then it brings in the question of like, what's, who's the bad guy here? What's Saul hiding? What are the Jedi hiding? That could have been like a season 2 focusing on them and Chimere and like his whole, I guess, his motivations and his interests and who he is as a
Hmm.
person, not just as like a bad guy, because like you get a lot of this kind of, what did I call him, like Darth Buddha at one point. He's
Right.
kind of like, he's got these really, like cool, he's just such a cool guy and he's super chill and he's got all the right words.
Yeah.
Like, I would like to know what his backstory is a little bit. What
Well, yeah, and we're obviously, I think, looking at exploring that now with Vanestra, knowing that they're connected. My other hint at their connection was he has that scar across his back.
the
And
whip?
she's the whip. I was like,
Yes. Yes.
interesting.
I did
Uh,
catch that.
right. So
And also, that's awful though, if she, like, whipped
whipped
him?
him.
Like,
You're a
come
bad boy.
on, student. Yeah.
Whipped him with a lightsaber.
Bad baby,
I
bad
don't think that's
boy.
working the way that you think it should work.
Yeah. But, like, that
So
would have been a really interesting season too, focusing on, like, the murder, the question of the Jedi, and then ending it towards the end of, like, the background of Vernestra's and Chimère's relationship. And then,
yeah.
like a season 3 could be like, oh, like here's Yoda, like how does the council deal with like everything that we know now? And to like kind of like moving it into a new era. This definitely could have been like a 3-part series,
Oh, 100%.
but it was really like it was short and sweet. Some of the moments were a bit slower than I wanted, and then some of the other aspects that I really liked felt like I was speeding through it. But not bad. Like it wasn't bad either. I still
No,
enjoyed a lot of
absolutely
it.
not. I like I said, I loved it more than I thought I was going to. Like I said, I tried to go in with as much of an open mind as possible.
Well, yeah, you kind of went in and you were like, it is, there's some things here that I'm
Exactly.
feeling. But I'm glad that it ended more on like a positive note for you. I thought the ending was really interesting. The
Yeah,
last 2 episodes, a lot of action, a lot of questions answered.
a lot of great things answered, a lot of good things. Like I said, the full ending, I'm still like, eh. Um, like the Dark Man on the island. There's a huge theory right now that is Darth Plagueis.
Tell me
Who
about
is
this.
so Darth Plagueis is the master of Sidious, the main bad guy from the first 3 movies, the one who turns Anakin into Vader. Um,
Okay.
and Plagueis is known as one of the most powerful Sith Lords there ever was, to the point where he could stop death, he could revive life, things of that nature. So it's a thought that it's him. It's not confirmed, obviously, and I don't think they're gonna confirm it for a while. But then it turns into, okay, then who the heck is Queer, however we're saying that name now. I don't know. Kira. Because he's not Sidious, obvious. Sidious isn't even close to being born yet. Well, if he is, he's young as heck right now. We're still couple hundred years before he starts making his way into power.
Okay.
Um, so it's just a question of, okay, if that was Plagueis, it makes some sense, but why and who and
Right. Like
so there's
what's
still a giant question of what.
so how did you feel about the Jedi kind of, well, I guess it's mostly Vernestra just being like nothing to see here. It was all soul.
It
Like
it makes more sense than most people I think are playing into it. I do feel the Jedi are more shady in some aspects of their lives than most people are gonna, because they're not perfect. That's the thing about it. Is everyone expects them to
human.
be these perfect. Yeah, they're still human. I mean,
Yeah.
even Obi-Wan had his flaws, and he was known as one of the greatest Jedi of all time. You know, he still stuck around the Jedi in some form or fashion at least a few times.
Mhm.
Uh, So it makes sense. And then, like, when you look into how Jedi act around politicians later on, it makes even more sense. This is kind of the downfall where politicians start getting involved and it pisses the Jedi off. And then 100 years later, it's still happening, and you see that rift where they don't trust any politician whatsoever.
I like
Where
that aspect because like as you know, as soon as there's one secret and then there's one cover up, they did a cover up over the cover up.
right,
And now like
straight up
there's
turning into QAnon in this.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So now that there's all of these, cover ups and, kind of glossing over the facts, as like this information is being retold, I feel like it's just going to raise more questions and cause more a bigger sense of like mistrust among
Hmm.
everyone, to the point where like it does seem like they're like this is the moment. We're
Yeah,
pinpointing this right now. This is going to explain why everyone like after this scenario going forward like things start to kind of unravel.
right.
And
Which
like
is
I
which is why they had the big cameo at the very end.
Can you explain that a little bit for me? Because I that was another question of mine.
Yoda?
Yeah.
Okay. So Yoda, during most of the High Republic period, actually gave up his seat on the council, and he was strictly training younglings. That's all he did for hundreds of years. He just trained younglings, and he still continued to do it even once he took his seat back. But I think this is where the Jedi start kind of downfalling a little, and so he moves back in, and that's where he gains the full power to the point where he is the top Jedi for a long time, and even during the Clone Wars. So the way the High Council is actually set up, there's actually two people in power. There's the one who's like most sensitive with the Force, and the one who's more militaristic, and that was um, Mace Windu.
Okay.
So him and we're kind of co-captaining it. But when the Clone Wars started, Mace Windu took a step back, and Yoda assumed all power.
Now when Yoda assumes power, does he kind of like clean things up, make things better?
I think that's what he thought he was,
Okay.
and that's why they turned from this flashy who they are Jedi to the more conservative you see hundreds of years later. Because let's face it, they messed it up a little bit with what's his name in one of the first episodes that everyone freaked out about that he was there, the Jedi Master. Anyway, um,
So are there other sides when like when someone's talking about Yoda's time kind of like in charge, do some people see it as a not so great time, like he didn't do a good job, or is it pretty like I guess, like, overall in the fandom, it's believed that, like, when Yoda stepped in, like, he
I think
was
it's consistent that Yoda was and is by far one of the greatest Jedi Masters ever.
okay.
He led the council the way he had to, and he tried his best. But I think Yoda also had the premonition of this is going to happen no matter what I do, so I'm just going to
Mhm.
try to make it as least painful as possible. And then when he failed to do that, and everybody died, that's why he put himself in isolation and went
Mhm.
home. Because he couldn't even deal with the thought that I just screwed all that up. Crap.
Mhm.
Um, so
More
there's a huge,
trauma.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, we still have 100, 200 years in between where we are now with the Acolyte and when Phantom Menace starts. So we don't know what happened in that time period.
Okay.
And as of now, we only know of two Jedi that are going to be through that entire period. You have Yoda and you have the other guy that I can't remember his name right now. But everyone was so mad that he appeared in the Acolyte because wait a minute, he's not supposed to be that old. And, but it was true. They actually changed his birthday in Wikipedia
Yeah.
to match up with the oh whoops yeah we forgot we put him in there yeah nope he's actually that old.
Okay, so
So
can I get your hot take on this? Are there any like are there any pros and cons here about showing Yoda at this time in like on in your perspective?
I I think it's going to lead into really like I said showing why the Jedi went from High Republic to Old Republic style. Um, and it's it's the connection between all the movies and everything we already know and bringing the Acolyte with the High Republic to fully connect so
Together.
people can see that connection. That's where I think they're going with it.
Yeah.
The only con I'd probably say I see to it is what is Yoda gonna do? Like, because if they screw up Yoda, the fandom's gonna lose their mind, right?
Yeah.
So if he's gonna have more of a part in the Acolyte, maybe season 2 or whatever, the fandom's gonna lose him, right?
Yeah, I
I
mean
mean, he's
that's like
mentioned in the High Republic books like twice. That's it. Like he
that's
exists and everybody knows he's there. That's it.
that's always a fear when like someone who is so beloved shows up and it's like
Are you about to
gotta
screw this up?
yeah,
Yeah.
give justice to my boy. Don't massacre my boy.
Exactly. So it's like, "Oh, please don't screw that up." It's the same thing with was that Darth Plagueis? Are you about to screw
Mhm.
up Darth Plagueis for the entire fandom who, like, literally built it off of what we thought? Because the books that have ever been written about Darth Plagueis are considered legend now, they're not considered lore. So
Okay.
we don't have any record of what is Plagueis now in the actual lore of Star Wars. So, it's
Yeah,
a huge question.
it's an interesting question about, adaptations and lore because on one hand, if you're a fan of something, you obviously want more of it.
Oh, 100.
Like if you love this world, you love this IP, you want as much of it as possible. But there's also the aspect of like you don't want your feelings hurt where they change something and you're like, "No, that doesn't match how I saw things." And you have like angry, keyboard warriors like this blah 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 blah
Mhm.
blah getting all upset. So it's like a very interesting like tightrope walk between at this point you're going to have to start like farming for content somewhere. Like there's only so much original content out there. So it's always interesting saying like, "Hey, well we kind of know some background details on this. We're going to bring it in and then we're going to construct a whole story about it," which is kind of cool and gives you the option to be creative and tell your own story within, like this
Mhm.
moment in history, which I think is a really interesting aspect. And I mean, it's one of the things about other series that I watch where like I think that's the most like thing that people complain about where it's like I didn't picture it like this, you got it wrong, and there's
Mhm.
always someone like deeply offended.
Right.
But I'm also in the camp where like if you take something that I love and we've explored almost all there is to explore with like the set, ground details of this world.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just like, you know what? Like, let's give me, this vague time, place, event, and like let's dig into it. Let's make it its own thing. We can tell our own story. And I think Star Wars as a whole is like walking that line right now where it's like we're giving you more. We know you want more. Even the people who hate this show, they're still watching it. Like they're
Right?
still talking about it. So like despite being upset, they're giving Disney what they want, which is views
Views and money.
and money. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
It's
so
like I said, they're just the crowd that's happening to scream the loudest because they want to
it,
scream and be heard.
this is true. This is true. But I
I
do
could go
like
on all these pages and start screaming about things I'm not liking about it, but I don't have the time or the care.
I mean, and that's typically like the way I approach things too. Like if I hate something, I'm not gonna dedicate an hour of my week to talking about it.
Right?
Like it's just that's why I stress
It,
myself out like that.
yeah. I mean, it's the truth that like I've watched so many movies and TV shows and everything in this world, and I can list the ones that I've started and went, nope, and turn off.
Yeah.
But I don't go then type up a 3-page review about it because I didn't watch the whole thing. So why do I care?
For me it's out of sight, out of mind. Typically if I
Exactly.
start something and I'm just not into it, like I forget about it and then I just don't come back to it. And then
Mhm.
someone's like, "Oh, you got to watch this show." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I watched like
Part
2
of it.
episodes and just like it wasn't for me. Like it just
Right.
didn't grab me." And I think that's fine, but dedicating like a whole, video about it on YouTube is like
Oh, it's been insane.
it's a wild
Honestly, it's been insane.
wild choice.
Oh man. Like I said, that was me with Game of Thrones.
You really didn't like it?
I watched a few of the first season and it didn't capture me. And then everyone's like, it's so amazing. I'm like,
Eh,
okay, I never got into it. Sorry.
different strokes, man.
It is
Like
what it is.
Game of
Uh,
Thrones, that's like I mean, that show is very intense. Like
I will say, other favorite part though about finding these final 2 episodes, kind of wrapping into here. This is the first time on screen we have watched a crystal bleed, and I
yeah,
that was so good. Like
I
just that little part, I was like,
I thought about you and Josh when that moment happened. We had talked about it previously,
Mhm.
and I was like, I hope they love it. I hope they're excited
Oh,
about
I
it.
love that part so much. Like watching the crystal actually bleed and turn red, and I went, it's happening. It just made so much more sense. And I was like, ah.
It was a really nice shot too, like very artistic, like
Oh
the
yeah,
pose
so
that she
perfect.
was in, like the stance and the way like Soul. Yeah, it was a really nice shot, visually appealing, looked
Mhm.
good. The themes of everything all kind of like coming to one at one point in the whole show. Like it felt like that was kind of like the climax of the story in a
Yeah,
way. It was nice that they saved it for that moment.
yeah, true. Mm. I'll admit, at first I was like, "Why did we just kill Soul? Wait a minute," and then they're like, "Oh, he's the fall guy." I went, "God damn
He's the patsy.
it, he's the
Poor
fall guy."
poor
No,
Saul. On one
didn't act.
hand,
Did he really? This is the thing about it. Though. We were sitting here like, "Soul's the big bad. Saul's done something wrong." Blah blah blah. Did he really do something wrong?
I mean,
Meh.
I don't I don't think
He
he's
murdered the
evil.
mom.
He's just misguided.
He killed the
Like,
mom. I get that.
yeah.
But when it came to the twins, he just made a choice. And it's a choice no one wants to make, but he had to make it because he couldn't keep both of them up. Others either save one of them or kill both of them.
Yeah, it was
You
both
know
options were bad.
exactly.
Like,
He
what's
was
he gonna
screwed either
do?
way. And obviously he
Mhm.
carried that guilt forever, especially after Osa failed and didn't make it.
Exactly.
So I was like, come on. Why are
Yeah,
we giving Soul such a hard time? And then they killed him, and I was like, oh, that's fall
yeah,
down.
yeah, on one hand, I felt really bad for Saul, but on the other hand, I was kind of just like so idealistic. I think that that was his downfall. He was way too idealistic. He thought so much that he could help. He tried so hard to do the right thing that like the logic was just kind of like
Just your
wiped from him.
neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. And like
Right,
I do appreciate characters like that because on one hand, like you do have very empathetic people watching where it's like he was trying to do the right thing. You know,
right,
like I can empathize for him. And on the other hand, you have people watching where you're like, buddy, use
like,
your brain.
what are you doing, dude? Ah. I will say though, the skills they gave Soul throughout this whole series have been amazing.
He
His
was
hand-to-hand combat, his
bad.
lightsaber
Yeah.
combat, he is a badass. I don't
Gnarly.
that.
Loved it. Yeah.
They killed it, and they were revealing so many. This is the other thing about the whole transition from High to the Old Republic is it's said that the Jedi lost a lot of abilities, and it's being shown that they really did because you never see Jedi. Obviously, more probably because we didn't have the CGI and the ability to do it, but there's a lot of things these Jedi are able to do that most Jedi aren't able to do in the Old and the New Republic because they don't know how. It's been lost. Nobody taught them. People forgot how to do it. So,
And two, like I think that was really fun for this season because of that like flashiness.
hmm
It makes like the battles and the moves and
oh,
like the visuals of it all really appealing. Like having that kind of like I
mhm.
mean, they've got like a little bit of this like bad boy energy going on. I don't know how else to explain it, but they do.
yeah,
The flashiness is cool.
yeah. I loved it. That was great. I think all the combat and choreography was great. Um, they truly kept to that because it was also a huge thing in most of the movies of like these battles could have been so much better. Why did you not do it that way?
Yeah.
Especially with the last three movies. Just bad. But I won't get into that. All right. So episode 7 and 8, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I thought it was a really nice ending. I thought it was engaging and like I said, like leaving more questions to be answered.
Mm-hmm.
Frustrating as hell, but also like well played.
Right.
Well played.
Well played.
Yeah.
Like I said, episode 7, I loved it. I loved every second of it. It made so much sense, and it brought everything together so nicely. And then 8 just kind of it dropped a little bit for me because I still don't get the ending in some points.
Mhm.
And also, we love the little guy. What's his name? I'm blanking.
Basil?
Basil. We love Basil to death. How did he keep just randomly popping up like, "Oh yeah, I was here this whole time." Like, "No, you weren't." What? How? Oh, man. I'm like, this little dude is a teleporter, and
He
nobody
is.
knows it. I'm like,
He
how is this
is.
happening? Um, but it's just
Is what it
so
is.
good, so good. I hope they bring more. Like, we get like more Basil in the next. Like, he's gonna be like a Padawan swinging a
Right?
lightsaber and going crazy.
I
That would be
think this is I think this is something that Star Wars does so incredibly well though. Like on one hand, I know that there's a lot of the times like you've got like a cute little guy and that's always
Mhm.
going to be like what you're selling the merch of, like baby Yoda. Like my
Oh God.
nephews, if I go into their home, I cannot tell you how much like baby Yoda exactly.
He's
Exactly.
everywhere.
Grogu all over the place. But
Look up
like
another one that sits on your shoulder somewhere.
yeah, but like it there's a reason why, because they are so extremely talented in making like these like cute, adorable, fun little characters where like the kids are like, we love it, and the parents are like, oh, like we love it too. And I
Oh yeah.
think like that's always one of the highlights to Star Wars, like as a whole, in terms of like these like other creatures, like everybody knows who Chewbacca is. Like there's
Right.
different races, they're different looks, like different ages. Some of them are cute, some of them are kind of ugly, some are kind of scary, but they always have like extra like creature characters around,
Mhm.
and they do it in a fun way. So like, yeah, of course, they're making boatloads of cash off of it.
Oh, obviously.
But still, like
Listen,
I
I'll be in
still
Disney World next week. If I find a basil, it's automatically coming. Like, that's
please,
not gonna be a
please.
negotiable. It's gotta
If
happen.
you find a basil, then I'm expecting TikTok videos about it while you're there.
Oh, I'll send you one. I got
Okay.
you.
Perfect.
No, yeah. Well, it's gonna be an interesting trip. Let's say that. I'm
Yeah,
wondering because now that it's ended and next week is when we're rolling in there, is there gonna be a lot of Acolyte merch dropping?
that's a really good
Hopefully.
question.
Please.
Document it,
I'm gonna
please.
try.
Now I'm
Well, look,
curious.
see how much I can find. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll be there at least twice in the Star Wars area, so we'll figure it out. It's gonna be fun.
sounds good.
Oh man. All right.
This was it.
This
This
was
was
it.
it.
It's over. No. Now we gotta find something else to
We
review.
will. We'll find something. There's
I
always
don't know.
something.
Next month. Is it next month? Either next month or the month after. The newest Star Wars game is dropping. Star Wars Outlaws.
Oh.
That's gonna be so I'm probably gonna stream that. Um but then yeah, we'll see. It just depends. There's so much extra. There's a lot of other Star Wars shows and things that are dropping soon that I hope we can get into. The Skeleton Crew is one I'm waiting for to come out so bad. That's supposed to be a really good one. A few other shows that are in the making, as supposedly. Uh, so we'll
We'll,
see.
pl-
We'll see
we'll
what the
play it by ear.
next adventure for Two Geeks and Road to Tarvalon will be. We will find something
Yeah.
because we're
I
never
feel
going to
like
stop.
I'm the Mike and you're the two geeks.
There
I'm going to change my name to Mike on the screen next
you
time.
go. You're the Mike. I love it. Amber is such a better name for a Mike than I think Echo is what we came up with last time. We put it out like, what do we name the Mike? He's the third character. And everyone's like, Echo. I'm like, I want to find a different name. All right. Thank you all, if you're watching this, for coming in and visiting with us. Please leave your comments. If you have a show that you think we should review, drop it in the
Ooh.
comments. Let us know.
Yeah.
Let's see what
Yeah.
you guys got.
Give us some feedback.
That would be
Yeah.
great. Yes. And how well did we review the show? Because
Yeah, I know nothing. So like I was on a
we're not late
journey.
night. We're not late show talk hosts yet.
Yeah.
We're working on it, but not yet. Please join us next time on Two Geeks. We're going to be doing a lot more Two Geek stuff coming up. Probably no live show for the next couple weeks because me and Josh are figuring out life right now, going all over the place. It's vacation time. That's what we're. I'm
I'm
officially
going on
vacation.
vacation. You're going on vacation. Josh is currently on
He's
vacation.
coming back from vacation, so he can work next
Yeah.
week and be jealous of us.
Exactly.
Thank you all so much. Please keep tuned in. Follow the Road to Tarvalon 100% that way. Sorry, wrong side. Road to Tarvalon and Two Geeks One Mic on all of our different platforms. And we hope you left here just a little bit more geeky than when you were. I have been Eamon.
I have been Amber, and I'm currently Amber,
Still
also
Amber.
soon to be Mike.
Soon to be Mike. Amber the Mike. We're gonna get you a T-shirt and everything.
No, but thanks for having me. This was so much fun. I love like getting to learn all of this stuff from you and Josh and just like take it all in. So yeah.
So great. Yep. All right. Thank you all. Stay geeky, my friends.